Welcome back, everyone, to another thrilling episode of Thrive Street Program Coach Tuesdays. This is your host, Jeremy Jones. We're talking about week 33, Wednesday, August 14th. So, for competition context, we want people to imagine they're being watched and judged by hundreds of people. I'm actually going to add that on here, hundreds of people. I was going to say thousands, but that could be a little intense. Hundreds of people. Uh, so, and the idea is for this is kind of a little bit of a preparation for something like a CrossFit competition. It's also thinking about like the CrossFit Open and having a judge count your reps and make sure you're hitting the standards. But it's just something that people should be aware of, that a lot of times they're focusing on just how uncomfortable they are, or they're trying to hit certain other parts of the technique, and they're not really thinking about what the actual standard is. And it's important to have standards. It's so that usually the standards are there for safety reasons. We want to make sure people are operating their body through the proper range of motion, so that they're not doing half squats and end up with knee problems, or they're not locking their shoulders out, so then they lose shoulder capacity. So a lot of the standard range of motion things has to do with safety, but there's also a consistency here. So if we want to make sure that they learn the movements and they do the full range of motion consistently from the first rep to the last rep. On these workouts, so when they compare workouts to themselves down the road, they can see that progress, and it's a correct measurement. If the first time they did it, they were newer and they weren't really trying to hit the standards properly, and they get a score, and then the next time they do it, they get a worse score, but they did it better. It's without having that consistency between the two, it's going to seem like they got less fit, and ultimately they got fitter because they did the movements properly. So, using a tool like this is just kind of fun. It's just kind of a fun way, go through some visualization and say, okay, imagine there's ropes, everything's roped off, and there's hundreds of people watching you, and there's a judge, or they're all watching you and judging you, or you're being recorded live on the internet, and everyone's going to be commenting on your form. Do this stuff like you were being watched by hundreds of people, and it's just another way to kind of make the workout a little bit different than the average day. So we got our dynamic warm up here. Just remember with this Jefferson curl, you might want to look that up if you're not familiar with it. But we do a very lightweight. We're going to start by curving the head down first and the upper back, and then we're actually gonna go all the way down, and really what we're looking for is to articulate all of the vertebrae in the spine. If somebody cannot round their back in an arch and articulate every vertebrae, then there could be issues going on there. So, or if they have pain going through this. Now, we're not doing this as a strength movement. You can actually do this, but it's something you have to be very deliberate with, but it is actually a strength movement that some people have used to great success. But we're just doing it more of a stretch and also more of a movement screen to see if anybody has any issues. And so it's a way for people to understand how their spine works and what muscles are firing. Again, we're not doing it for strength or hypertrophy or anything like that. We're just doing it more for that movement screen stuff. But people might question it, and I do have an article. You can Google it that I like to refer to, and that's Coach Sommer's Jefferson curl. I think it's gymnastics bodies, and they're big fans of doing those, and he talks a lot about what the benefits are as well. Then we do some bent over rows. Again, lots of rowing movements showing up in our warm ups because of the snatches and everything. Even though we are doing single arm ring rows as a superset, again, we just want to make sure that we're taking care of those shoulders and getting that scapular control that we need to keep our shoulders healthy. Then we'll do some hip mobility and then we're skipping the skill practice warm-up today, so we've got a little bit more time to get through these 7 sets of front squats and dumbbell bench press or floor press. Now, if you want to do barbell bench press, that's totally fine. I like to use the dumbbells as the superset. They tend to be, because they're a little bit less stable. They don't have because it's not a closed chain movement where your two hands are on one implement. People use less weight, and so that has it's a little bit less taxing on the nervous system. And remember, with these supersets, we're using different muscles, but we also don't want to overwhelm people. So if you did a superset of a really heavy front squat for 2 and then a big set of 8 bench press, that could be really taxing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It would just mean you'd need more time between sets. And then you have an issue with your more advanced people needing 4 minutes or more between sets, and your beginners being done in 2 or 3, and then you have almost like 2 classes going on. So I like to keep the things like this with the having people do the dumbbells. And of course, if for a whole class, you'd have to have two barbells and two racks for everybody, so that just doesn't make a lot of sense either. So go ahead and have people do the dumbbell bench. If you want to have people do bench, if you have an incline bench or whatever, they can do that as well. That's fine. But it can get some of the bros who want to get big chesticles happy. Then we got Fortunate Son. So this is a workout we've done fairly often. We did it back in May, so it's been about 4 or 5 months, and it's 12 front squats, 12 burpee pull-ups, and it's one of the few workouts I actually program burpee pull-ups. As you guys probably know if you've done this in the past, it's hard to fit on most rigs. There's just not enough room for people to do a easy burpee pull-up when you have a big class and not everybody has their own pull-up bar. Or even if they do, they just tend to be like getting in each other's way. So that's one of the reasons why I don't do burpee pull-ups very often. I actually think they're a great movement. It's kind of like they're barbell complexes where we combine different movements, and this is a body weight complex where we combine different movements. They do also tend to cause some shoulder problems because we're going from that pressing out of the burpee right into the pull-up. It tends to make the front of people's shoulders, where that bicep tendon and pec interact, get really angry. So it's also something I don't like to do for large volumes. I've programmed in the past GI Jane, which is 100 burpee pull-ups per time. I've personally done that workout many times, but again, it's just one that tends to be really hard on people's shoulders. So so that's one of the reasons why another reason why we don't see them come up too often. If you do have a space issue with these, I do recommend maybe taking a look at the team version. And basically what it has to do is one person squats while the other one does the burpee pull-ups, and then they switch. So now you need half as many barbells and half as many stations for burpee pull-ups. And that can make it a lot easier. And they're still actually doing the workout as prescribed, so they could still log it and everything. If they end up having to wait a long time because of their partner, they might want to put that in their notes. But it's still the same workout because they're still doing all of the reps. I guess the one difference is one person starts on the burpee pull-ups and then finishes with the front squat, so that's a little bit different, but should still be pretty good. So some people ask how high should the pull-up bar be? It should be above the hand, right? So they have to jump to it. So if this is the pull-up bar here, usually what we're looking for is they can barely touch it with their fingers. I'm trying to figure out what the easiest way for me to draw this is. So maybe they can touch it with their fingertips. So if they had their full grip on the bar, they're hanging. I also like it a little bit higher than that, so maybe a few inches above that, so there's a little bit more of a jump. Now for your people who are scaling, what I recommend is they go to a really low bar, and then they set up a box, right? So if you had your bar here and then your rigs right here, have them just do a box where they can step onto the box and then do a jumping pull-up, right? So they can do a step on the box, jumping pull-up, and then step down and do their burpee. So if usually you can get away with like a 12-inch box and a low pull-up bar. That's going to be ideal for scaling for them. In fact, I'll write that in here. Health. Burpee to, there we go, burpee to step on a box or jumping pull-up, so that people can see that written out, so there'll be less questions. Should be a pretty fast workout, so you do have the option of running 2 heats or 2 full waves. You could have some people go ahead and do the workout. Maybe you have some people who are going pretty heavy and they want that extra rest between sets, so you can take your first group of people who are already done lifting, send them into the workout, and then as they wrap up, the next group can be cleaning up, and then they can do it here as well. Again, we didn't do a skill practice warm-up, which should have plenty of time to get through 2 full waves if you really needed to. But again, I think a better option is to do the team version. And because it's a lift and a short metcon, I did add the cash out and the hypertrophy here. So again, the hypertrophies that should be done in unbroken sets. So if they're doing glute bridges, they should select a load they can do 15 reps in, plus or minus a rep or 2 on those last set or 2. But the idea is it should be unbroken sets. They're trying to do big sets because that 10 to 15 rep range is usually much more geared toward muscle growth, even up to the 20 rep range, and you'll see me put 20s in there sometime, like here, for example, on the JHC sit-ups. And that's more for hypertrophy. That's more for developing larger muscles and a little bit less on the strength side. So people need to understand that they can't break these up like they would in a metcon. That's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot, and thrive on.